She uploaded a picture with another guy captioned, "Finally someone who gets me smiling face with smiling eyes, while still talking to me daily." I didn't confront her. Months later, she deleted the post after people tagged me and asked questions she couldn't explain away. "You wouldn't understand anyway." She said it so casually, like it was a fact she'd looked up and confirmed. Like I was just a given. I didn't say anything back. I just nodded, picked up my coffee, and watched her scroll through her phone like the conversation had already ended before I had a chance to participate in it. I remember thinking, that was a strange thing to say to someone who spent the last 14 months listening to everything you had to offer. But I let it go. I always let it go. And that moment, that single, throwaway sentence whispered over a Tuesday afternoon coffee on the corner of West 72nd Street. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 26. She was 24. We'd been together for just over a year, living our separate lives in the same city. Her in Chelsea, me up in Morningside Heights. Marlo. That was her name. And if you'd asked me 4 months ago what I thought about her, I would have told you she was the kind of person who made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. Genuine laugh. Sharp mind. Terrible taste in movies, which she would fight you on until 2 in the morning with the energy of someone who had genuinely never lost an argument in her life. She worked in editorial. Freelance stuff mostly. Pitching essays, doing content consulting for a couple of lifestyle brands, writing long-form pieces for digital magazines that actually paid decent rates. She was good at it. Like, really good. The kind of person who found the exact right word for a feeling you didn't know you had until she named it. I worked in sound production, studio work, some mixing, a bit of composing for indie short films. Nothing glamorous, nothing that made people gasp at parties, but it was mine and I was building it slowly. We met through a mutual friend, Hadley, who threw dinner parties that nobody asked for, but everyone showed up to anyway. Marlo sat across from me and spent the first 20 minutes disagreeing with everything I said about a documentary we'd both apparently watched. By the end of the night, I had her number. 3 weeks later, we were dating. And for a long time, a genuinely good, long time, it was easy. Easy is the word I keep coming back to. Not boring. Not comfortable in the numb kind of way. Just easy in the way that feels rare. We didn't fight much. We talked about everything. She'd call me at midnight from her desk when she was stuck on a piece and just needed someone to bounce ideas off. I'd drag her to listening sessions for mixes I was working on, and she'd give me feedback that was somehow both completely non-technical and exactly right. It worked. For a long time, it genuinely worked. But somewhere in month 10, something started to shift. Not dramatically. Not in a way I could put my finger on and name. Just a coolness. Like the temperature dropped 2 degrees, and I kept waiting for it to come back up. She started talking about work more. About her writing circle. About a new group of people she'd been spending time with. Creatives, she called them, with a kind of reverence in her voice that felt slightly pointed. I didn't think much of it. People expand their social circles. People find communities. That's a good thing. I told myself that. Several times. The first time she mentioned Beckett, it was in passing. We were walking through Riverside Park on a Saturday afternoon, and she was telling me about a workshop she'd attended. "This guy Beckett was there," she said. "He's doing really interesting stuff with narrative nonfiction. Like, actually interesting. Not just interesting for the sake of saying so." I nodded. Said something like, "That's cool." She kept talking. I kept nodding. The name floated through the conversation and disappeared. That was October. By November, Beckett had a last name. Marlo mentioned it once, almost offhandedly, and I couldn't even tell you what it was because I wasn't keeping score. I wasn't tracking. I had no reason to track. She was my girlfriend. She was calling me every day. She was texting me between meetings and sending me voice notes when she was on the subway and wanted to tell me something that couldn't wait. Why would I track? But here's the thing about a slow shift. By the time you notice it, you're already standing somewhere different than where you started. December came in cold and crowded the way New York Decembers always do. The city turns into a fever dream of lights and noise, and everyone moves just slightly faster than usual, like they're all racing towards something. Marlo and I had plans for most of it. Holiday things. A gallery opening that Hadley invited us to. Dinner with some of my work contacts. Her office holiday thing that I was technically invited to, but she kept saying was probably going to be boring anyway. I noticed that part. Filed it somewhere. Kept moving. The gallery opening was the first time I saw Beckett in person. He was tall. Dark hair. The kind of guy who looked like he'd been assembled to stand in an art gallery, effortlessly put together in a way that looked accidental, but clearly wasn't. Marlowe's face did something when she saw him across the room. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't excitement in an obvious way. It was more like recognition. Like seeing someone from a life she'd been running parallel to the one she was in. "Beckett," she called out. And she was already moving toward him before she finished saying his name. I followed. We were introduced. He was fine. He was charming, actually. Easy to talk to, smart. The kind of person who made you feel interesting for about 10 minutes before you realized you'd been talking to him for an hour. I had a perfectly civil conversation with him about sound and storytelling. He'd done some podcast work. We had actual common ground. And yet, something in me sat just slightly wrong for the rest of that night. Not jealousy exactly. More like awareness. Like suddenly being very conscious of the temperature in a room you'd been sitting in for hours. I didn't say anything to Marlowe about it. We walked home. She was happy, light, almost buoyant. She talked about how inspired she felt. I said good, kissed her at her door, went home, and I pushed the feeling down like I'd been doing with the other small feelings for the past 2 months. January. The calls kept coming. Every day, sometimes twice. Morning texts, voice notes, FaceTime while she ate dinner alone on nights we weren't together. From the outside, nothing had changed. From the inside, I was starting to sense a distance that didn't match the frequency. You know how you can talk to someone every single day and still feel like they're not quite there? Like the words are all present and the timing is all right, but the person behind them has one foot somewhere else? That was January with Marlowe. I'm not diagnosing it. I'm just telling you what I felt. And what I felt was that our conversations, as constant as they were, had started to have a ceiling. She'd get to a certain point in talking about her work, her ideas, her writing, her plans, and then she'd kind of close. Not visibly, not dramatically, just a slight redirection. A topic change so smooth you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. I was paying attention. I just didn't know what I was paying attention to yet. In February, she joined a writers' collective. She mentioned it the same way she mentioned everything. Casually, in the middle of a longer story, like it was a minor detail. Some of us from the workshop are doing a more regular thing. Just a small group. Beckett kind of put it together. I looked up from my laptop. That's cool, I said. When do they meet? Thursdays mostly. Sometimes Sunday afternoons. And you're excited about it? Yeah, she said. And then her whole face changed. Lit up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Yeah, I really am. It's the first time in a long time I feel like I'm around people who actually get what I'm trying to do. I heard that. I really heard it. Not as an attack. Not even as a comparison. Just as information. People who get what I'm trying to do. I didn't say anything about the implication sitting beneath that sentence. I just said, I'm glad. And I meant it. Sort of. March. She was happier. Genuinely, visibly happier. And I want to be honest with you. A part of me was glad. A part of me looked at her energy and thought, she needed this. She needed creative community. She'd been isolated in some ways during the pandemic years, and this felt like her coming back to life in a real way. That part of me was sincere. But there was another part. The part that noticed she talked about Beckett specifically in a way she didn't talk about the others. The part that noticed Thursdays started running long. The part that noticed she'd put her phone face down when she was with me in a way she never used to. She texted with her screen slightly turned. She laughed at things sometimes, and then looked up and changed her expression. I'm not a suspicious person by nature. Ask anyone who knows me. Ask Ellington, my best friend since college, who will tell you I have historically given people approximately one benefit of the doubt more than they deserve. But this was accumulating. Quietly. Steadily. Like water rising in a room you haven't checked in a while. I didn't snoop. Let me be clear about that. I'm not a snooper. Not because I'm above it morally or whatever. I just never had reason to be. I wasn't checking her phone. I wasn't asking where she was. I wasn't doing the anxious thing of tracking her location or fishing for information through other people. I was just present, watching, noticing. And then one afternoon in late March, I was sitting in her apartment while she was in the shower, and her laptop was open on the coffee table. I wasn't looking. I wasn't intending to look. But the screen was right there, and a notification popped up. Not a private message, just a Facebook post she'd been tagged in. I didn't read the message. I didn't click on anything. But I saw the name. Beckett. Tagging her in something. A photo, it looked like. I looked away. She came back from the shower. We watched TV. I didn't say a word. But something had shifted in me. Something had moved from background concern to foreground attention. I found it by accident. That's the honest truth. I wasn't going through her social media. I wasn't hunting. It was a Friday night in early April. I was on my own Instagram, half watching a show, doing the mindless scroll thing you do when you're tired and not ready to sleep. And it appeared in my feed. Not because I followed her, but because Hadley had liked it. And Instagram, in its infinite wisdom, decided I needed to see what Hadley was liking. It was a photo of Marlo and Beckett. They were at some kind of rooftop gathering. She was laughing, genuinely, fully, the kind of laugh that takes over your whole face. He had his arm around her shoulders in the easy way people do when contact has become casual. And the caption, I remember reading it twice. Then a third time. Finally, someone who gets me smiling face with smiling eyes. That was it. No location tag. No list of people. Just that. Just those 5 words and a soft little emoji. I put my phone down. I picked it up again. I read the caption one more time. And then I set the phone face down on my couch and stared at the ceiling for a while. Let me tell you what that caption did to me. Not the photo. The photo I could have explained. Friends take photos. People put their arms around each other. Moments get captured. I could have moved through all of that. But that caption, finally, that word was doing specific, deliberate work. Finally implies a before. Finally implies that something was missing. Finally implies that the thing she now has, this understanding, this being gotten, was absent somewhere. And I was the somewhere. I was the place it was absent from. She was still calling me every morning. She had called me that very morning. She was still sending voice notes. Still texting. Still present in all the ways she'd always been present. And she had gone and posted a photo with another man and written finally underneath it. I sat with that for a long time. I didn't confront her. I want to explain that choice because I know how it sounds. I know the instinct is to assume I was weak or scared or too passive to act. That's not what it was. What it was, honestly, was that I needed to understand what I was looking at before I responded to it. Because here's the thing about being me. I don't react well in real time. I never have. If I had called her that night and said, "Hey, I saw your post," one of 2 things would have happened. Either she would have had a smooth, reasonable explanation ready, the kind of explanation that makes you feel crazy for being hurt by it, and I would have accepted it before I was ready to. Or she would have turned it into an argument about trust and me checking up on her, which would have become the story, and the actual thing, the actual feeling of that caption, would have gotten buried. I didn't want either of those conversations. Not yet. So I waited. I watched. And I paid attention in a way I probably should have started paying attention months earlier. April became a study. I want to be honest, it wasn't comfortable. Living with that knowledge while continuing to be present with her, answering her calls, texting back, showing up to the things we'd planned. It required a kind of controlled stillness that cost me something every day. But I was learning things. The post had comments. I went back to it the next morning and read them. Most were generic. Love you too. So cute. Goals. People commenting the way people comment, reflexively, without reading too carefully. But there were a few that sat differently. One from a girl I didn't recognize. Okay, but when are you just going to make it official? Eyes. Marlo had responded to that one with a laughing emoji. Just the emoji. No denial. No correction. Just the laugh. I called Ellington that afternoon. Not to unload exactly. Just to talk to someone real. Ellington is the kind of person who listens without performing. He doesn't do the dramatic gasping thing. He doesn't immediately take your side just to make you feel better. He just hears you and then tells you what he actually thinks. I told him what I saw. I read him the caption. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "What did she say when you brought it up?" "I haven't brought it up." Another pause. "Why not?" "Because I want to know what I'm dealing with first." He was quiet again. And then he said something that stayed with me for weeks. "Just don't wait so long that you start becoming someone you don't recognize." I thought about that a lot. Don't wait so long that you start becoming someone you don't recognize. Because there's a version of watching and waiting that turns into obsession. That turns into you building a case, cataloging evidence, constructing a trial in your head where you're both the prosecutor and the jury. I didn't want to be that person, but I also needed to see clearly. So I kept going. She was still calling every day. This is the part that I think people struggle to understand when I try to explain it. The double nature of it. Because here's the thing, the calls were real. The warmth in them was real, as far as I could tell. She was talking to me like she always had. Sharing things. Asking about my work. Telling me about her day. If you'd handed a stranger our text thread and our call logs from April, they would have told you we were a healthy, close couple. Nothing alarming, nothing cold. But I knew about the post, and she knew I knew Instagram existed, and yet she never mentioned it. Not a single. Hey, posted a picture with Beckett from the rooftop thing. Hope that's okay. Not a. Don't read anything into it. He's just a friend. Just nothing. Like the post existed in a different compartment that had nothing to do with us. That silence told me more than the photo did. May. I started paying closer attention to her social media in a way I hadn't before. Not obsessively, but deliberately. And what I found wasn't a trail of obvious betrayal. It was subtler than that. It was Beckett liking everything she posted within minutes. It was her liking everything he posted with equal speed. It was the way she'd caption things using phrases I'd heard him use in conversation. Like his way of seeing things was slowly replacing her own. It was the Thursday nights running later and later. It was the way she started shortening our calls on certain nights, not cutting them off, just finding natural endings faster than usual. I'm exhausted. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Early morning. I should sleep. Long day. Same time tomorrow. All reasonable. All things anyone would say. But when you lay them out in a pattern, they start to look like a person carefully managing two things at once. Late May. We were at dinner. Just the two of us, a small Italian place in the West Village she loved. The kind of place with candles and wine bottles and a menu that doesn't change. We were 2 glasses of wine into it, and she was talking about a piece she was working on. It was a personal essay, something vulnerable, something real. She was describing it, and I was listening, and then she said something that stopped me cold. Beckett thinks I should lead with the anecdote about my mom. He says it contextualizes everything that comes after. I took a sip of my wine, set the glass down carefully. And what do you think? I asked. I think he's right, she said. He always sees exactly where something is trying to go, even before I get there. She wasn't trying to hurt me. I actually believe that. I think she was just talking. I think the membrane between what she told him and what she told me had gotten so thin that she'd stopped monitoring it. And that in itself was the story. I looked at her across the candlelight. She was animated, happy, talking about her work with the same energy she'd had when we first met. And I felt 2 things simultaneously. Something warm, because I did love watching her be that version of herself. And something cold. Cold in the way that comes when you realize that version of her had found a different address. I didn't say anything that night. I held it. Steady. But here's what was happening in the background. Something I didn't know yet. Something that would only become clear later. People were seeing the post. Our mutual people. Hadley had seen it. Sullivan, a guy from my circle whom Marlowe also knew, had seen it. Others who knew both of us were seeing it and doing the quiet math. And the math wasn't adding up. Because I was still showing up at things with Marlowe. We were still visibly a couple to anyone who looked. And there was this post. This finally, sitting public on her profile. And the comments were building. Not dramatically. Not a pile-on. Just questions. Innocent ones and less innocent ones. A girl who knew us both from Hadley's world had commented 2 weeks after the original post. Wait, aren't you still with? Marlowe had deleted that comment. I didn't know she'd deleted it. I found out later. But she had. Silently. Like trimming a loose thread before it unraveled something. June. This is where everything started to shift. Sullivan. Good, uncomplicated, slightly oblivious Sullivan, who genuinely did not understand why he shouldn't do what he did. He tagged me. Under the photo. A simple comment. Yo, is this the rooftop thing you were telling me about? Tag. Just like that. My name was now attached to a photo of my girlfriend captioned finally, someone who gets me with another man. My phone lit up with the notification. And this time, I didn't put it face down. I watched. Within an hour, Hadley had replied under Sullivan's comment. Wait, I'm confused. Another person I vaguely knew had replied. Yeah, wait, what's happening here, lol. Someone from her editorial world had replied with a gif that was just a person looking back and forth. And Marlowe had gone silent in the comments. No response. No explanation. No breezy laugh-it-off emoji. Just silence. And the thread just sat there, building its own quiet momentum. She called me that evening. Normal time. Normal opener. Hey, how was your day? And I want to tell you that I kept my voice exactly level. Because I had known this moment was coming. I had been ready for it. Not ready in the sense that I had a speech prepared. Ready in the sense that I had already processed enough of this to not need the call to carry all of my weight. It was fine, I said. Long session in the studio. How about yours? She talked for about 10 minutes. Work stuff. Errand stuff. Nothing about the post. Nothing about the comments. Nothing about Sullivan tagging me. I listened. I responded where appropriate. And at the end, I said goodnight. And she said goodnight. And that was it. But here's what was happening on her end. I got this later. Partially from Hadley. Partially from the receipts of what I could see publicly. She was in a panic. Quiet, controlled, surface level composed. But underneath, a genuine scramble. Because here's the thing she hadn't accounted for. When you post something like that while you're still in a relationship, while the person is still in your daily life, you're operating on the assumption that those two worlds stay separate. That the post world and the real world don't intersect. That nobody connects the dots. She had underestimated how many people sat at the intersection of both worlds. She had underestimated Sullivan's total lack of social awareness. She had underestimated Hadley, who was methodical and observant in a way that Marlo sometimes forgot. And she had underestimated the simple, basic physics of social media. Once enough people are looking, it becomes very hard to look away. The next 2 weeks were interesting. That's the only word I have for them. Interesting. Because nothing exploded. Nothing confrontational happened. There were no screaming matches. No dramatic accusations. Just a very slow, very public unraveling that she had no clean way to stop. The comments kept coming. Not in a pile-on sense. People aren't that coordinated. But in the way that happens when a thing is visible and confusing and people have opinions. Someone I didn't know DM'd me asking if I was okay with everything. I left that on read. Hadley called me. Not to gossip. Hadley doesn't do that. But she was genuinely concerned. Are you guys okay? She asked. I want to say yes, I said. Which was honest. She was quiet for a moment. She deleted the comment you were tagged in. Hadley said carefully. I saw it before she did. I let that sit. Okay, I said. I just thought you should know. I appreciate that. And I did. Marlo deleted Sullivan's comment. But Sullivan had already screenshot it. Not maliciously, Sullivan just does things like that. Screenshot stuff without thinking about why. And when someone in a group chat I was apparently not supposed to know about asked what happened to the comment, Sullivan sent the screenshot. And the screenshot made its way around the way screenshots do. Which meant that now there were people asking Marlo directly. In DMs. Over texts. At events. What's going on with you and Beckett? Are you and your boyfriend still together? What did that caption mean? Questions she couldn't answer cleanly without either admitting something or lying explicitly. And she was smart enough to know that explicit lies leave specific trails. So she was stuck. The post came down on a Thursday night in the 3rd week of June. I noticed it was gone at around 10 p.m. Just checked. And it wasn't there. No announcement. No story about it. No explanation. Just gone. Like it had never existed. Except it had existed. And a lot of people had seen it. And some of them had screenshots. And the absence of the post somehow said more than the post itself had. Because people notice when things disappear. People wonder what needed to be hidden. Here is where I have to be honest about something. By the time the post disappeared, I had already made my decision. Not in response to the post coming down. Not in a reactive, angry way. But in the quiet, clear way that happens when you've been sitting with something long enough that it stops being uncertain and becomes just known. I knew what had happened. Not the precise mechanics of it. Not every detail. But the shape of it. The emotional shape. Marlo had found someone who felt new and exciting and creatively aligned in a way that I, after 14 months, had started to feel like furniture. Not because I'd failed. Not because I'd been absent or cold or uninterested. But because that's a thing that happens. People grow toward light. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped being her light and become her stability. Which is its own kind of thing to be. But it's not the same thing. And she had spent 6 months navigating that gap by keeping both. The stability and the light. Without addressing the gap between them. Without having a single honest conversation with me about what was changing. That was the part one couldn't forgive. Not the feelings. Feelings don't ask permission. But the choice. The deliberate, daily choice to keep me on the line while she figured out what she wanted. I called her on a Saturday afternoon. Not emotionally. Not weaponized. Just called. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, she said. Easy. Normal. Hey, I said. Can we talk? Actually talk? Not the usual check-in thing. I need a real conversation. A pause. Brief. Yeah, of course, she said. What's going on? I saw your post, I said. The one with Beckett. The caption. Silence. The kind that has weight in it. I saw it in April, I said. I've been sitting with it since then. She started. I'm not calling to fight, I said. I'm calling because I think we both know something has changed and neither of us has been willing to say it out loud. And I'm tired of waiting for the right moment because I don't think the right moment exists. So I'm making one." She didn't say anything for a long moment. And then she said, very quietly, "I didn't mean for it to be like this." I believe her. That's the strange thing. I actually believe that she didn't mean for it to be like this. I don't think she sat down and calculated a strategy. I don't think she woke up one morning and decided to run a parallel situation. I think she fell into something. Feelings, connection, the electric feeling of being deeply understood by someone new. And she didn't know how to handle it, so she handled it by not handling it. By keeping both things alive and hoping the problem would resolve itself somehow. Through Beckett backing off. Or through her feelings cooling. Or through me simply not noticing. She hadn't counted on Sullivan. She hadn't counted on screenshots. She hadn't counted on the quiet, stubborn patience of someone who was paying attention. "I'm not going to ask you to explain the post," I told her. "I understand what the post was. What I want to know is whether you were ever going to tell me. Whether there was ever a version of this where you sat me down and said, 'Something has changed. We need to figure out what we are.'" Another long silence. "I don't know," she said. And that was the most honest thing she said in the whole conversation. I don't know. Because I think she genuinely didn't know. I think she was hoping to avoid having to choose. Here is what I found out over the next 2 weeks. Not from Marlo. From Hadley, who knew more than she'd initially let on. From a mutual acquaintance in the writing collective who reached out because they felt weird about something they'd witnessed. From the gaps in things Marlo eventually told me herself. Once the walls came down. Beckett and Marlo had been emotionally close since February. Not physically, as far as I can verify and as far as what I was told, but in the way that is sometimes harder to navigate than physical. They'd been sharing things. Personal things. The kind of things she used to share with me. Writing vulnerabilities. Family history. Dreams. Late-night conversations that ran way past what a creative group needs to run. He knew things about her that I'd had to ask about. He knew things about her that she'd voluntarily given without being asked. And Marlo, who was in some ways still figuring out who she wanted to be as a writer, as a person, as a woman with specific needs and specific hungers, found that terrifying and wonderful and confusing all at once. And instead of being honest about it, she kept the door open behind her. She kept me in the daily rhythm. She kept herself from having to grieve something she wasn't sure she wanted to lose. Here is the late backstory. The thing that reframes everything. 6 months before any of this, before Beckett, before the workshop, before the collective, Marlo and I had a conversation that I half remember and she probably half buried. It was in August, the summer before all of this. We were talking about her writing, about her ambitions, about what she actually wanted her life to look like in 5 years. And at some point she had said, quietly, almost testing it, "I sometimes feel like the people in my life don't fully understand what I'm trying to do. Like they're supportive, but they're supportive from the outside. Does that make sense?" I had said yes. I had said I understood. I had said, "I might not always get the technical side of it, but I'm always in your corner." And she had nodded and the conversation had moved on. But I think, looking back, that was the first time she named the gap. And I heard it, and I answered it, and I thought I'd addressed it. I hadn't. Because "I'm in your corner" and "I understand what you're building" are two different things. And she needed the second thing. And I gave her the first. And she never told me that. She never said, "That's not enough. That's close, but it's not quite what I mean." She just kept that quietly to herself. And eventually found someone who seemed to offer it without being asked. I'm not blaming myself. I want to be clear about that. What she did, the silent parallel running, the post, the months of daily contact as cover, none of that is on me. That was her choice. But I can also hold the truth that the gap was real. That something was missing. That maybe neither of us had done the work of naming it and asking whether it could be fixed. That's the part that lives in the complicated space. Not blame, not fault. Just the ache of something that might have gone differently if different words had been said in a different August. We broke up on a Sunday. Clean. No screaming. No list of accusations. No dramatic scene for anyone to witness or recount. Just two people sitting with the reality that we had become something that neither of us could grow inside of anymore. She cried. I didn't. Not because I wasn't feeling it. I was feeling all of it, actually. But because I'd already grieved most of this. I'd been grieving it since April. Probably since that Tuesday on West 72nd Street when she said you wouldn't understand anyway, and I didn't push back. By the time the actual ending arrived, I had already done most of the work of it. She said she was sorry. More than once. I believe the apology was genuine. I also believe that genuine apologies, while necessary, don't actually change the shape of what happened. You can be sorry and still have done it. Both things are true. Marlo and Beckett. I don't know the full story of what they became. I don't track her social media anymore. I heard through Hadley, about a month after everything, that they were officially something, which suggested they'd been unofficially something for longer. I didn't feel what I expected to feel when I heard that. No spike of rage. No twist of hurt. Just a flat kind of confirmation. Of course that was always where it was going. Ellington took me out the weekend after the breakup. Just to walk. We walked the High Line from end to end, and he didn't ask me how I was feeling. He just walked beside me and talked about other things. Baseball. A movie he'd seen. A piece of equipment he was thinking about buying. And somewhere around the midpoint, I said, the worst part isn't losing her. The worst part is the months of being held in place while someone else makes up their mind about whether to let you go. Ellington was quiet for a moment. Then he said, yeah, just yeah. And that was the right answer. I want to talk about why I didn't confront her when I first saw the post. Because I've turned it over a lot. And I stand by it. But I also want to be honest about what it cost. Those 2 months, April through June, changed me a little. Not in a dark way, but in the way that extended, deliberate silence does. It made me more careful, more observing, less willing to let things float past without naming them. I'm not sure that's entirely a bad thing, but it's a different thing than who I was before. The version of me who would have believed that daily calls meant everything was fine, who would have filed away "you wouldn't understand anyway" as just a careless phrase, who would have let "finally someone who gets me" pass without understanding what finally was pointing at. That version of me was more comfortable, but he wasn't as clear. There's also this. The silence, my choosing not to confront immediately, actually did something that a confrontation would not have. It let the truth surface on its own. If I had called her in April, furious and hurt, with the caption pulled up and my voice shaking, she would have had the upper hand in that conversation. She would have had the opportunity to frame my hurt as jealousy, to make the story about my insecurity rather than her choices. And she was good with words. She would have done it well. But by waiting, by watching, by letting the comments accumulate and the tags land and the questions build, the truth didn't need me to drag it out. It came out because it couldn't stay in. And when it came out in public, in a way that she had to see and couldn't reshape. I didn't plan that. I want to be clear. I didn't set some strategic trap. Sullivan tagged me because Sullivan does things like that. Hadley noticed because Hadley notices things. The comments happened because social media is a fishbowl. I just didn't panic. I just held still. And the thing revealed itself. 3 months after. It's summer in the city now. The kind of long, heavy summer where the heat sits on the streets like a second pavement. I'm working. Good work. A project that I'm genuinely excited about. Composing original score for a short film series that a director I've admired for years is putting together. Something I would have told Marlo about immediately. Something I did, actually, tell her about. I mentioned it to her once in February when it was just a possibility. She'd said, "That's amazing, I hope it works out," and moved on to talk about something in her own world. I remembered that. I held it up against the version of her that had told Beckett things about her mother and her childhood without being asked. And I understood something. Not about her specifically, just in general. The people who will celebrate you exist. The people who will be genuinely lit up by your wins, who will ask follow-up questions, who will remember what you said 3 months ago and bring it back. Those people exist. I had been with someone who did that for the person she was most excited about. I just wasn't that person for her. Not in the end. And she wasn't that person for me. We were good for a season. And then the season ended. Hadley asked me recently if I wished I'd done anything differently. I thought about it honestly. I wish I'd had the conversation in August, I said. What conversation? The one where she said people in her life don't really understand what she's building. I wish I'd pushed on that. Asked more. Really understood what she was telling me. Instead of just reassuring her and moving on. Would it have changed things? I thought about that too. Maybe not, I said. Maybe we were always heading here. But it would have been more honest. Both of us would have known what we were dealing with sooner. Hadley nodded. Yeah, she said. That's fair. I don't hate Marlo. That's a real thing. Not something I'm saying for the sake of seeming evolved. Genuinely, I don't carry hatred for her. I carry some residual hurt that flares occasionally, mostly at odd hours. I carry some fatigue from the months of holding the knowledge without speaking it. But I don't look at what happened and see a villain. I see a person who didn't know how to handle competing truths, Who chose avoidance when honesty was harder? Who held on to me as insurance during a period when she should have either leaned in or let go? That's a real human failure. Recognizable. Not monstrous. Just a failure. Beckett. I never spoke to him after that gallery opening. I don't know how much he knew about me. How much she told him. Whether he was aware he was finally in a situation that still had a current person in it. I genuinely don't know. And at some point I had to decide that knowing wasn't necessary. That it would add detail but not clarity. That the story was complete without his chapter. Sullivan texted me, weeks after everything, with exactly one message. Did I mess something up with the tag thing? Hadley said I might have. I stared at that message for a long moment. And then I replied, no, you actually kind of helped. He sent back a thumbs up. Classic Sullivan. The last thing I'll say is this. There's a version of this story where I'm the victim, where she's the villain, where the whole thing is about betrayal and disrespect and what she did to me. That version isn't wrong, exactly. Those things happened. What she did was its own kind of dishonesty, regardless of the reasons behind it. But the version I actually live in is more complicated than that. It's the version where two people stopped being what each other needed and neither of them was brave enough to say so until the world forced the conversation. It's the version where a photograph and a caption and 5 letters did the work of 6 months of swallowed conversations. It's the version where a single word, finally, told me more about where I stood than everything she'd said in 14 months. And I'm not angry about that anymore. I'm actually almost grateful. Because at least I know. There's something particular about finding out the truth not through a screaming fight or a discovered text thread or a confession ripped out at 2 in the morning. There's something particular about finding out because someone posted it. Because the feelings were too big to stay private. Because finally couldn't wait for the right moment. Because she was so full of whatever this was that it spilled out into public view before she thought to contain it. That tells you something. Not just about her, but about what she had with him. And in some quiet, even-keeled place in my chest, a place that has made peace with what it cannot change, I understand that. I don't like it, but I understand it. The city is still here. The same streets. The same coffee on the same corner of West 72nd, though I've avoided that particular block. The same work, slowly building. The same studio with its familiar smell of old equipment and soundproofing foam. The same me, more or less. A little quieter. A little clearer. Still here. And the post? It's gone. Deleted on a Thursday night in June when the questions got too heavy to carry. But I saw it. And I read it. And it said everything it needed to say. Finally someone who gets me. I just wasn't him.